Thanks everybody for being here. I'm gonna talk for about 15 minutes, and then do we have time for Q&A? Is that an option? Because I think my wife, the most she's ever put up with me talking is about 5 minutes. So if we can make it to 15 minutes, at least I'll have something to brag about to her. So this is a really interesting last 12 months in research on machine learning. Research in machine learning has been going on for decades, but it was really just within the last year or two that a big part of the policy community and the national security community took notice of AI in a fairly dramatic way. I think despite the predictions of some, AI didn't become self-aware, but policymakers became aware of AI. And we're seeing the impact of that across DoD, across the intelligence community, but also Department of Transportation and DHS, CDC. We're seeing it across government. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about the kinds of changes that we've seen in machine learning capabilities in the last few years. I'm going to talk about what IARPA has been funding in machine learning research. And then I'm going to talk about what I see as big challenges for the research community moving forward. The first thing I'll note is that we in national intelligence are fundamentally interested in the other form of intelligence, not artificial intelligence, but the kind of intelligence that we as humans use to make sense of uncertainty, to make sense of errorful data, to learn, to adapt, to achieve goals in a complex environment. And having more of that kind of intelligence allows societies to make better judgments and allows societies to make better decisions. So the world has scaled up in complexity, though, at a rate that outpaces the number of human brains to deal with that level of complexity. And there are scaling limits to human intelligence to make sense of that complexity. So we're well past the point where it would be possible for thousands of intelligence analysts or 17 agencies with thousands of intelligence analysts to make sense of all that complexity. So we do need to find ways of leveraging tools in order to break down that complexity into pieces that humans can better understand. And bringing machine learning to our problems is then a way of bridging the gap between the resources that we have and the resources that we need in order to make sense of the world. It allows us to focus human brains and eyeballs on the problems where those brains and eyeballs are most needed. There's good reason to think that machine learning in various applications can help to bridge that gap. Particularly right now, those that involve perceptual data, such as imagery or speech. Progress in machine learning on perceptual data has been most impressive in the last several years, particularly in imagery, due to the availability of large data sets, affordable large-scale computing infrastructure, and improved statistical techniques. And this has been especially celebrated in the case of deep learning, which has been the object of increasing industry investment over the last few years. What's really interesting, I think, about deep learning is that most of the methods that are being used now really date back to the late 1980s. But we were waiting for the computing and data to catch up with those methods. So we were waiting for a two-step ladder, and now that we have that ladder, there's lots of low-hanging fruit that we can pick in different applications of machine learning, especially to perceptual data. What we don't know is how tall of a ladder we'll need to empty the whole tree. The recent wave of machine learning achievements in deep learning and the most mature applications of deep learning have been in computer vision. And the top performing object recognition systems are now operating at human levels of accuracy and at substantially greater speeds and lower costs than humans. So facial recognition systems have reached parity with human ability as long as the images are under ideal conditions of frontal pose. Systems are now in commercial use in smartphones, online image search, medical image analysis. Advances in computer vision now feed into improved capabilities for robotic systems. So I think one opportunity for us in this room is to think about how can we take the things that are already on the shelf, for example, in imagery analysis, and apply them to problems that we work on. There's a lot that could be done to leverage existing tools and automate some aspects of national intelligence so that an analyst is spending less time on tasks like finding or counting tanks and more time thinking about why the tank is there at all and what that tank might be doing tomorrow or a week from now. Current machine learning approaches are very good at the former task of counting and identifying tanks, and not as good, if they're able at all, to think about the latter tasks, which is what is the tank doing there. So one way of thinking about the near-term advances in machine learning is thinking about how to parse this landscape of analytic tasks between those that are well-suited to machine learning systems right now and well-suited to human judgment, so that we have co-pilots in this that can actually help split the labor. There are many outstanding organizations that are advancing research in machine learning and in ways that are relevant to national security, including NGA research, which is represented here, as well as DARPA, ONR, the national labs, InQtel, and a variety of research efforts within industry and academia. I want to talk a little bit about IARPA's role in this research. So we fund over 500 academic and industry research teams from around the world. And fully about half of that work is in some way relevant to machine learning. Our work is fairly broad in that we fund everything from computer science to neuroscience to physics to work on human judgment and political science. And in the words of one of our staff members, we fund everything from AI to Zika, which is literally true. We co-fund a research effort with Microsoft looking at how to do better Zika surveillance using advanced mosquito traps. But one of the things that's, I think, most interesting about the work that we've been funding in machine learning is how it's harder to tell now what's not a machine learning program. That is, so much of the research that we're doing in social science includes aspects of machine learning. So much of the work that we're doing in computing or neuroscience involves aspects of machine learning. IARPA's Finder program, I'll give a couple of examples of some research that we're doing right now that has machine learning as a core theme. We have one program called Finder, which does automated geolocation of imagery based on features within the images. So let's say you're handed a photo and you're trying to figure out where on earth was this photo taken. Because the particular person who took this photo, if it's a member of ISIL, wasn't polite enough to geotag that picture for us. We have to figure out where on the planet the photograph was taken, which cave this is, which plot of land this is. So looking at a variety of features within the image, including geological features, botanical features, streetscape features, terrain, landscape, horizon features, we are able to accurately assess where on earth an image was taken. IARPA's Aladdin program, which is continuing now to develop new analytics for streaming video. So the way that most of us find a video on YouTube or on Google Video Search is that we're looking for tags that somebody has fat-fingered in and attached to a video. And it might be the person who posted the video, or it might be somebody who was looking for the video and found one that was of interest and then started to attach keywords to it. Again, this is a case where the folks that we're after are not considerate enough to tag their own videos for us. So they'll post a video that's an IED how-to video or a martyrdom video They won't tag it. They'll send out the URLs to their friends. We're interested in being able to find those videos based on the features within the video itself. And our Aladdin program has done just that. It actually looks through the content of the video, looking at objects and scenes in order to describe what's happening within the video. IARPA's DIVA program is focused on applying some of those same techniques to activity detection in surveillance video. So can you tell from a live stream of, say, a surveillance camera within a metro station whether somebody is placing a bag and leaving it unattended, or handing off a bag to someone else, or loitering at regular intervals to suggest reconnaissance, or brandishing a weapon? Our Babel program is one that identifies the deep structure of language in order to develop new speech recognition systems. So most speech recognition systems that are in commercial use take many months, if not years, to develop. We often don't have that luxury. If we find that there's a new language that has become important because an important event has happened in a particular place in the world where we did not have a lot of language expertise, we need to spin up a new language capability very quickly. So Babel is able to go from new language to a mature speech recognition system in days rather than months. We're now applying those same sorts of principles to a new program on machine translation called Material, which aims to develop machine translation tools for low resource languages, as well as knowledge discovery or information retrieval tools. Then we have a suite of programs at IARPA that are focused on event forecasting. Our OSI, Mercury, and CAUSE programs are taking features from many different data streams in order to provide early warning of events such as political instability, military mobilization, disease outbreaks, or cyber attacks, by looking at the kinds of digital exhaust that suggest that a change is happening within a society or on a network. To give one example, during a disease outbreak, we see increased frequency of disease-related keywords in social media, web search queries, different social networking sites. But we also see the geolocations of mobile devices stay put. They don't go to work and back. If somebody's absent from work, their mobile device is going to show that. You might also see that there's an increase in retail sales of thermometers or net flow that is increasing in traffic to health-related websites. Even online reservations, such as dinner dates that get canceled because someone's sick. So we're interested in using this kind of approach to be able to detect and even predict all sorts of important global events by looking for the patterns of behavior that coincide or even precede big societal events. We also invest in 2 programs to develop better computing approaches with approaches that have applications to machine learning. Our QEO program, Quantum Enhanced Optimization, is focused on using a particular kind of quantum computing to find faster solutions to machine learning problems. We also do quite a lot of work with IBM in the general problem of gate-based quantum computing. The problem of quantum annealing is one that has near-term applications to solving a class of machine learning problems that are insuperable with classical methods. Our Microns program at IARPA is focused on understanding how the brain computes. The brain is really an extraordinary computing device. So you all are consuming maybe 20 watts of energy, depending on how many snacks you've had in the back. The best supercomputers in the world that don't reach human levels of performance for many fairly simple pattern recognition tasks consume 1 million times as much energy. So how is it that the brain is able to compute so efficiently and so well on sparse learning tasks? That's really the goal of the Microns program, is to reverse engineer how the brain computes with nanometer resolution of the wiring diagram in mammalian neocortex in order to develop the next generation of machine learning. So deep neural nets, which are sort of the basis for most of the recent discussions of machine learning, takes inspiration from a conception of how the brain computes that was popular in the 1950s. And we've gotten a lot of mileage out of that inspiration. It turns out, though, not to be all that accurate. So the question is, what happens when we update this inspiration from the brain to actually become neuromimetic? Can we significantly improve the kinds of machine learning approaches that we use? In addition to programs, IARPA also funds prizes. And with prizes, competitors don't need to submit a proposal. They just need to submit a solution. If somebody figures out a way to efficiently solve an imagery recognition problem, we don't force them to go through, a federally approved accounting system. We just show up with a duffel bag full of cash that I hand deliver in an alley in DC. And this approach then means that it's a level playing field for a much broader number of participants and inventors. So hobbyists who are working in their pajamas in their basement can compete with large defense contractors or brand name universities. And this has really made a number of extraordinary achievements in machine learning. So that's one area where we continue to invest. There are a few areas, though, where we think substantial progress will be needed before we can broaden the applications of machine learning, and I'll list a few of those. The first is causality. And despite the impressive gains that we've made in being able to better identify correlations in data sets, we've made relatively little progress in understanding how events are caused or affected. The most important events in the world are those that we can affect, or those that affect us deeply and that we hope to influence. We're very good at determining when two events coincide, but we're not as good at understanding from observational data how an event is caused or affected. A second area where I think substantial progress is needed is explainability. One major challenge for machine learning is to get a system to explain to a human user why it generated the result that it did. And this has become especially challenging with deep learning, where the methods are fairly opaque to human inspection. Several of IARPA's research programs actually require that explainability be baked into a system, because an analyst will not use the system unless it understands how the result was generated and it can defend that result to a policymaker. But there are other outstanding programs like DARPA's Explainable AI program, XAI, which aims to develop explainability in cases where you didn't bake it in from the start. A third important topic where we need progress is rare and extreme events. Most machine learning approaches are optimized for average results on average data. But for national intelligence applications, there's a special need to optimize at the extremes. National intelligence matters most at the corner cases of low probability, high consequence events. Military conflict and terrorism are thankfully rare events. But if one's training a system on historical data, that means then that there are relatively few examples of, say, catastrophic terrorism to learn from. So how can we better train and test our systems on low-frequency events? A fourth problem is robustness to spoofing. This is a special problem for our community and national security. And there's a number of concerns of how various AI systems might be spoofed through fairly simple hacks. In fact, it's become a sort of parlor trick among computer science undergrads now to fool an image or object recognition system into thinking that, say, a picture of a cat is actually a refrigerator, just by changing a few pixels that you know are particularly important for that image classifier. So something that's visually indistinguishable for a human that looks like a cat could instead be misclassified as a refrigerator. And one can imagine various applications of this in image recognition and national intelligence, where the consequences of misclassifying an object could be disastrous. A fifth major challenge, I think, for us and for other organizations is data sets. One analysis of advances in machine learning found that the biggest leaps forward in machine learning have really been made after the results of large data sets that were used for training, testing, and benchmarking. And the most notable example is the release of ImageNet, which led to much of the current attention on deep learning. In the geospatial domain, the release of SpaceNet and other geospatial imagery data sets is, I think, making possible great leaps forward in doing image recognition for overhead imagery. But what are the other important data sets that the government should be funding and making accessible to the research community in order to make breakthroughs for machine learning? And I'd appreciate your thoughts on that. The last topic that I want to bring up is S&T intelligence. There's fairly broad consensus that machine learning is and will be important. So how can we better assess the sophistication of advances in machine learning, the pace of global research and development, and indicators of significant breakthroughs to estimate their likely impact? IARPA has done some work in the past in trying to develop better tools for scientific and technical intelligence, including things like running prediction markets with 10,000 scientists and engineers from around the world who could make real money bets on whether different technologies would be developed by a particular date, as well as developing tools that analyze publications and patents in the millions in order to understand fairly subtle trends. But I think this is an area where we need much more substantial work in order to understand the horizon of machine learning work that's ahead of us. I should note that the government will not solve these problems alone. In addition to research, IARPA participated in the recent policy discussions regarding AI. And along with the National Science Foundation and others, IARPA co-led the recent White House R&D strategy for AI. As part of that effort, we conducted a data call on U.S. government investments in machine learning research. And it's about $1 billion per year, which seems relatively small, particularly given that industry's R&D investment from just, say, the top 5 companies that are investing in AI is over 10 times that amount. So industry investment, which is also increasing much faster than government investment, is going to be critical here, and we need to find ways within government in order to best leverage those investments that industry is making, including providing the kinds of demand signal of where we think the R&D investments will need to be focused in order to address problems of national need. If you're a government organization, the R&D that we've developed at IARPA is free to you. And I would encourage you to reach out so that we can brief you on the kinds of technologies that we've already developed. If you're from academia or you're from industry, I do encourage you to visit IARPA.gov in order to see the kinds of funding opportunities that we have available, including those in programs that I mentioned, but we launch new programs at least once per month now. A major new research program is being launched. And we have several new prize challenges that are on the horizon. If we do want to deliver on any of the potential that we have for automating some aspects of national intelligence as well as other functions of national need, we will need a strong collaboration between industry, academia, and government. This is simply too significant of a research challenge for any one of those pillars of society to solve on its own. And with that, I think we have about 2 minutes for Q&A. Sorry to leave it to that short. Yes, ma'am.
Mike. I'm Mitzi Worth. I'm with the Naval Postgraduate School, but 40 years ago I was the first female political appointee at the Navy. I did the staffing for Jimmy Carter. So I'm really impressed to see what you've done. My question is always, what happens when our opponents get this technology and we're not ahead of everybody? And what could be the negative consequences of what you're doing? I think of the things...
Great question. Yeah, so one of the things that we ask now before any new research program is how can this technology be used against us? Would we regret this technology in 5 to 10 years or 20 years? Because we're also in an environment where it's very difficult to keep secrets. Even if we classify a technology, what's the probability that that technology will eventually be leaked, reverse engineered, copied? So we start by asking, is this something that we think gives a comparative advantage to the United States that can't be easily misused against us? And I think that's an important question to be asking across the board in this domain, because there are relatively low barriers to entry to developing these tools and weaponizing them, not just by nation states, but also we're seeing now non-nation state actors that are developing autonomous weapons. Yeah, great question. Any other questions? Yes, sir, in the back.
Sorry. Thank you. How do we anticipate these being used domestically to infringe possibly upon privacy interests?
Yeah, so IARPA has a suite of research efforts that are focused on privacy, including things like how to protect, how to encrypt data during processing in such a way that it's still useful using homomorphic encryption. And I think that's a critical area for research. The other thing is that a lot of the applications of machine learning to being able to make better inferences about consumer buying habits or interests, say for marketing, those raise important privacy questions. So this is really a question for all of society, which is how much do we want any entity to know about our own preferences, given the kinds of digital breadcrumbs that we're leaving everywhere. From the perspective of the intelligence community, our efforts are really focused on trying to collect foreign data, analyze that data, and then protect our own data. There, I think making advances in things like secure multi-party computing, homomorphic encryption, zero-knowledge proofs allow us to fulfill important national security and domestic security goals without decrypting data that should be left private. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Ben Lowson, Navy. I just want to suggest an area that we might be missing, a really big area that could actually help the way we do operations, and just get your take on it. It would be a social network for conducting government business across the whole of government. Because right now we're still using emails and phone calls and meetings to get most of our work done. But maybe with a data analytic driven feed, pushing information up to senior leaders having direct contact with the ground level, and especially across the agencies. Are we doing anything on that? Can we do something on that?
Yeah, so I have a funny story about that, which was a couple of years ago. I tried to convince the presidential daily briefers to install on the president's tablet that he uses to read the presidential daily briefing, to install on there some tools that we could use to analyze what the president was most interested in. And the PDB staff thought that was a hilarious suggestion for us to instrument the president's briefing tablet just so we could use him as sort of a research subject. That didn't go over well. But the general notion that decision makers could actually be using tools that better filter information for them, that allow them to access information on the fly more seamlessly, and network with other policymakers who are asking some of the same questions of the data, is, I think, a rich one. Where you are starting to see in the intelligence community analysts using those sorts of tools. I think it would be great to see policymakers use them too.
Will you give me a pot of money to do that?
Let's talk afterwards, especially if you can get on the president's tablet. Thanks. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Judy Kwasny from the National Institutes of Health, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your science and technology across government ideas, and if you have any outreach or connections in the biomedical arena, public health, wellness, things of this arena.
Great. So for those of you from government, there is a machine learning AI working group that's part of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, NIST-C organization, and I would recommend that you find out if your organization doesn't already have representation on that working group. I think it would be most welcome there in order to have the kinds of discussions about what are the challenges that different agencies have in data analytics and machine learning. Particularly in health, the kinds of applications to make better sense of electronic health records, to discover patterns of disease incidence, to be even able to make better predictions about disease. Just to give one example from IARPA, we had a program called Open Source Indicators that was able to predict flu incidence 2 weeks faster than traditional health surveillance, just by looking at these patterns like people canceling their dinner dates or people using social media to describe their symptoms. So there's lots of rich potential, I think, to apply some of these tools to public health and epidemiology, which is my background. I used to work on infectious diseases like malaria and tuberculosis. Usually we were too late to really influence the course of an outbreak. We have tools now that allow us to get ahead of these outbreaks, and it would be great to use them. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you all for your time.